Are you sick and tired of your wife taking no accountability for her actions? Are you feeling worn out about everything being your fault? My name's Luke Finn, and I'm the founder of the ARC system, where we help dads struggling in the marriage transform their marriage into a new unbreakable marriage. And today I'm joined by our ARC legends to help you deal with the issues in your marriage. ARC legends assemble. Top of the morning to you guys. How are you doing, you beautiful motherfuckers?
Doing
Good?
amazing.
Good morning.
Awesome.
How are you?
I'm good, man. Thank you very much, Falcon. So let's dive right in. The question that we have today, Falcon and Optimus, is Jeff from the US says, my wife takes zero accountability. What can I do? So first and foremost there, let's acknowledge how frustrating it is when we feel like our partner is not taking accountability. We've all been there at some point. So let's dive in with maybe from your side, guys, your story. Have either of you experienced that in your marriage?
Yeah, 100%. I kind of viewed accountability more in regards to like the responsibility of the relationship. I mean, even though we technically weren't together, and we were cohabitating. I mean, I looked at it as if we were roommates within the same house. And for my experience, it was that on each of our nights, we tried to make sure that the house was tidied and clean so that the other person coming in for the following day didn't have to clean up after the next person. So I made sure on my part, I held my accountability and made sure that the house was tidied, clean, all my laundry was done. But there was a lot of nights where I came in after one of her nights and a lot of the stuff wasn't done. The house was a mess. And it made me furious, definitely, to try and pick up after her shit, which, I was doing on my part. So I made sure that I was holding up to my end.
Gotcha. So there was a lot of frustration when you felt like you were doing all the work and you had a simple kind of wish for Kate and it just wasn't being done. Okay,
Correct.
gotcha. What about yourself, Falcon?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think at some point everyone's relationship does go through this, and I think what it does, it really creates like an emotional imbalance, right? Because, at one point, you start doing you start doing the work, you start apologizing, realizing, the things that you may have been doing wrong and trying to change them. And if they're not taking accountability, you're really not going forward, right? And that's that's kind of where frustration seeks in.
Yeah.
Frustration, and then it turns into maybe sadness, and then resentment, and then doubt, right? Because you start questioning what is really going on with your relationship. Like, why are you the one broken, right? Kind of mentality. And that's that's kind of some of the things that you can experience through that, for not taking
Sure.
her not taking accountability.
It can really make you feel frustrated and also then on one side powerless because, I mean, at the end of the day, you're only responsible for yourself. So when your wife isn't doing what you would like to do, you can really end up feeling powerless. So it's definitely a tough one. So for me personally, I've also been there as well, Jeff. I think we've all been there at some point. Myself and my wife, we used to get into the big arguments back in 2011, and we would both take our position and would refuse to budge. So this is also another part. We'll get into the solution shortly. You stick around. We're going to give you 3 clear actions that you can take today, Jeff, and any of you guys that are currently feeling like your wife's not taking accountability for her actions. We're going to give you 3 actions today that you can take to improve your marriage. And I'd also, to make sure that this message gets around, guys, please do us a favor, smash the like button so that this video gets shared around to other dads that need to hear this message. And say hello. If you're watching us on the live, drop a hi. We're happy to interact with you and connect with you. So now reflecting back, guys, on that frustration when your wives were not taking accountability for their actions, what do you think you were doing that was making the situation worse? Before we get into the actual solution for Jeff, let's talk about how we as men can sometimes make the situation worse when our wives are not taking accountability and there's this blame game going on. Why don't we start off with you, Falcon?
Yeah, so putting pressure, putting pressure on the relationship, and desiring an outcome, having an expectation, just because you're doing it, doesn't mean that, they may be ready for it. So by having that expectation, by thinking that because you're doing the growth, you're doing the learning, you're putting in the work, doesn't mean that they're ready for it. So
Okay, gotcha. Thanks for sharing. What about yourself, Optimus?
Sorry, what was the question again? It was
What do you feel like it was from your side that was making the situation worse?
right. Yeah, so just in regards to the same thing that Falcon said, it's putting the pressure and trying to over communicate how that's something that they need to do on their part. But I know in some instances it almost feels like you're trying to get control of the situation, which and they see it as sort of that whole control factor and the manipulation and everything. So it definitely strains the situation and the conversation a lot more than it needs to be, by putting in that pressure, and almost at one point it's just going to blow like a pressure cooker, because the more you keep pressuring that situation, it ain't going to come out to the situation or the final end game that you are looking for.
Right. Yeah, I think it's something we do, and it's something we also not just can do with our wives or in relationships. I mean, in relationships generally, we can end up doing that, especially with our kids, when we start to escalate, right? So things are not going the way we would like, and we start escalating. And if we do that with our wives, it usually doesn't go well, because as soon as we start applying force, that she's going to want to fight, right? That's where we're going to get them defensive. So from my side, it was very clear what was making the situation worse between myself and Evie was getting the ego getting in the way of, having a good relationship, of wanting to be right more than anything, rather than trying to understand each other. And we spent a long time back in 2011 of where we get into these big arguments, and I would say, you were doing this and this and this, and I'd be able to give her a really good breakdown of all the things that she was doing wrong. She would argue back, and ultimately she'd finish the conversation. We'd finish the conversation where she would feel like she was broken somehow, that there was just something fundamentally wrong with her. And that was how I was making it worse. How are you going to get anybody to open up if you are blaming the other person? And the irony of it is, when you are telling the other person that this is all their fault, you're then obviously not taking accountability whatsoever for the dynamics in the relationship, which you are both ultimately responsible for. There's not just one person that's responsible for the dynamics in your relationship. It's the two of you. So that is a big one. I find with the ego, if we let our ego get in the way, we make the situation worse. I also find that resentment can build up in marriages, as the marriage starts to get into difficulties and resentment builds up, then people are unwilling to really submit or concede to certain opinions because they don't want to be seen as wrong, right? So if resentment is built up and you feel like you're just pissed off with your wife, or she's pissed off with you, you don't really want to concede again. So it ties back to the ego. And the other one, though, that can also play the other dynamic is trauma, right? If you're somebody that has had bad experiences of when you admit that you have been in the wrong, and somebody literally nails you to the cross for that, rather than just going, hey, thank you for, taking ownership and sharing that with me, you take the opportunity to nail that person to the cross, then they're not going to want to share. And so if that person, for them, if they've had trauma from being open, and admitting their shortcomings in the past and have had bad experiences from that, they're going to not want to open up and take responsibility for what's happening in the marriage. So as you guys know, in the ARC system, we practice radical ownership. So we're only responsible for ourselves. And it's really important to be able to take that ownership, because only when we take full ownership ourselves, it allows us actually to be able to differentiate between what is mine and what is hers, right? Because that can be some muddy, blurred boundaries there between what am I actually responsible and what she's responsible for. So what do you guys think, before we get into the 3 actions that Jeff can take when his wife is not taking accountability? What do you guys think from your sides are some actions that he can do to improve the dynamics in the relationship?
Definitely get your emotions in check.
Mm-hmm.
Because then if you have your emotions in check, you can come to a clear, point of communication where it's literally just talking, without, the blame game and the egos and everything. And it's just, a very easy conversation to have. There's many times where I've used that and just said, let's just have a normal conversation between 2 adults. We don't need the emotion in the background. And sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. But that's how I sort of use it in my situation.
That's smart. So you have your emotions in check, but you also have some pretext for the conversation. So we're going to have this conversation. Let's be adults. So you kind of prepare Kate for that conversation.
Correct.
That's smart. That's a good one. What about yourself, Falcon?
Yeah, my biggest one was detaching from the outcome, not having that expectation that, oh no, you have to take ownership for this, and which kind of brings to your point, right? To the ego. So detaching from the outcome, setting boundaries, right? Obviously having those boundaries and maintaining them, and then just leading by example, like take ownership for what you do. You can't control what anybody else does, you know, you can't control what she does, right? So you can only control what you do. So if you, um, if you take that into consideration and bundle it up, I feel like you, those are the only things you can control, right? So, and at one point you got to stop playing that ping pong game, where it's back and forth. It's the same cycle over and over and over again. Because then, you're back at square one if you don't take ownership for what you do.
Really well said, Falcon. And that's key what you said, as in the cycle. It only takes one person to break the cycle. One person, not 2. It's like, this is really important to remember, that it can be frustrating when your wife is not taking accountability, but you have a lot more influence than you actually think you do by, like you said, breaking the cycle by taking radical ownership yourself. That's a really great insight. So let's have then look at these 3 steps that we would recommend you take when she is not taking accountability. So the first one, so Optimus actually hit on this already, is the first thing you need to do is regulate your emotions. Let's talk about this a little bit, guys. So how important is it for us to be able to regulate our emotions when we're having conversation, when we feel our wife is not taking responsibility or accountability? How important is it that we can regulate our emotions? Like what will happen if we are not able to regulate our emotions? Why don't you start off there, Falcon?
Blow up. If you can't regulate your emotions, you can't. It's gonna be a blow up. So yeah, get your emotions in check, man. Check yourself before you break yourself.
Check yourself before you break yourself. Yeah, right on. Totally agree. What about yourself, Optimus?
Yeah, same thing. It's that whole pressure cooker thing, right? Like, you're not gonna get the outcome that you're looking for if you are, throwing out those huge emotions, which I know we're all humans and we have them, but I mean, at the same time, you got to process them and regulate them so that you can come to the conversation with a clear mind, with the clarity and the emotional safety within that conversation to be had to get to that final outcome.
Right. It's incredibly important. And the thing is, nobody teaches us how to regulate our emotions, right? I know as a kid, I was told just go play sport. And that's great, right? It's an outlet. But when things are starting to get pressurized and the things are starting to escalate in your relationship, it's very hard to if you want to stay calm in the moment and not escalate the situation. If you're watching this, you'd like some help with that, I'd highly recommend enrolling in our free masterclass. You'll find the link down below. In the masterclass, we're going to teach you a method for regulating your emotions so you can stay calm when things start to get heated in your relationship, which is really, really important. Okay, then once you regulate your emotions and you know that you can stay calm and have this conversation with your wife, the next thing is we want to have clear and open communication. One of the biggest mistakes that we make, guys, here, let's just say we're regulating our emotions, we've got that, we're staying calm, we're not blowing up when the shit hits the fan, but we get into the conversation with your wife. Now, I think Optimus gave a really good example there of how he tells her, hey, we're about to have this conversation. Let's be adults. So you add some pretext to the conversation before you get in. That's really smart. One of the mistakes we make, not just men and women, when we're getting into conversations like this, is we make big, generalized statements like, you never take responsibility, or you're a terrible mother, or you're never looking after the kids. You always put it on me. Making these big statements is going to escalate again. So really avoid making generalized statements like, you always do this, you always do that, you are this type of person. So you're making it her identity. If you're making it her identity, she can't change. And as we all know, in the ARC system, is one thing that's possible is change. You can change as human beings. So the last thing you want to do is painting your wife as this type of person, and she's not able to change. She can change. So guys, from your side, what do you think is the importance of the role of clear and open communication? And maybe if you can give a couple of examples of how you implement it. I think so. Optimus, you already gave that there with the context of, hey, we're about to have a conversation. Let's be adults about it. What else has helped you with conversations regarding clear and open communication when it came to responsibility and accountability?
Oof. I think it had to be the conversation itself, and like not those generalized comments or statements in regards to her, but just like Falcon said, those expectations. So it's not the fact that you're blaming her, it's just how we both need to show up. Rather than putting the blame on the one person, it should be putting the onus on both of us on how we both need to show up in the relationship, because we both have parts in it. It's not just one-sided. So, making clear, concise statements that both of us need to do to come together in that situation.
Yeah, both of you taking 100%, because it's not this 50-50 is bullshit. It's like 100 and 100%. I think that was a game changer for me in our relationship when we started saying, okay, I'm 100% responsible and you're 100% responsible, rather than this kind of 50-50 or 70-30 bullshit. It's like everybody needs to do their part. Okay, Falcon, thanks for that, Optimus. What about yourself, Falcon?
Yeah, I think in regards to this, it has to be how structuring the conversation, like you obviously you have you go in with what you want to say, right? And then you have to think about it like, I can't change what she does, just what I can do, how I show up every day. And like you said, making those general, you did this, you're doing this, or it only makes it makes it worse, right? It makes the problem. You said it in the beginning, something about the trauma, right? It makes the trauma worse because they're not gonna
bring it up to the surface for her. Yeah, and you both take your positions, and it just then it becomes a kind of a bitter fight where nobody's willing to give up ground.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So
that's very good. I agree with that one as well, Falcon. I think what's also really important here is that we need to keep. So we talked about not making generalized statements. We need to have clear examples. So clear examples for your wife, so she can understand how it's showing up, how you feel she's not taking accountability, and how it's making you feel. So, and it needs to be done in a timely manner. So always the way we work in the ARC system is, if something happens with your wife, you need to address it within about 24 hours using our communication guide, which if you would like that, it's totally free. You can find it down below. It's a 7-step process on how to address sensitive subjects. You guys can find it down below in the details below this video. You're more than welcome to download that. And it would start off with, so we talk about having a fact and a feeling. So you want to keep it real, have really concise example where your wife can tie it back to exactly what happened. So fact and a feeling. So fact would be, for instance, I'll give an example here. Yesterday, when you said, I'm a terrible father, so that's a fact. It was yesterday, and she said that. So you want to keep it. You don't want to put in more, tell more stories. This is a big mistake that men make. We start putting in loads of details. We're all emotional, and we blow it up, and then it just makes the situation worse. We want to keep it really concise. So it was yesterday, and you said I was a terrible father. Fact and a feeling. Then you want to say, so that's the fact. Sorry, that's the fact. And then the feeling, I felt upset. Yesterday, when you said I was a terrible father, fact. Feeling, it made me feel upset. And then you want to get context. Can you help me understand what was going on for you? And that's how you get into a conversation with her. And you want to listen to her, what was going on for her, rather than jumping the gun and coming in all guns blazing, right, and making the situation worse. Listen to her. Why did she say that? You know, what was going on for her? And then once you listen to her, if you agree with her and you can understand her, that's great. In a lot of cases, though, you're not going to agree with what she's saying. And you can say, listen, I hear what you're saying. At the same time, when this happens, so let's say she's saying you're a terrible father because you got angry with the kids. So I hear what you're saying. At the same time, when I get angry with the kids, I'd really appreciate it if you don't call me a terrible dad. I'm doing the best I can do. Do you think in future maybe we can just go aside and, you know, maybe just make me aware of I'm starting to get worked up, but you don't need to call me a terrible father, because at the end of the day, we both want the best for the kids, right? Just say yes. And there you go. There you now have a solution. You work on a solution. And this is how you slowly but surely start functioning as a team again, because that's so important with this clear and open communication, is to get yourself and your wife functioning as a team. And when the resentment builds up in the marriage and she's not taking accountability, you're not a team any longer. You're actually opponents. And that's where things get very difficult. So that's really important regarding the clear and open communication. If you found this little role play we did here useful, again, go and download that free communication guide down below. And then the final step here, and this is the one that is actually the most challenging, set clear boundaries, because boundaries can be defined in so many different ways. And a lot of the times, I would say most problems that we're having in a relationship boils down to not setting clear boundaries. So guys, what do you think? What do you think how can setting clear boundaries help with your wife taking accountability? Let's start off with you, Falcon.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big one for me, because I realize that it's not only setting the boundaries, but also maintaining the boundaries. That is the hardest part, because I mean, yeah, you can say like, oh yeah, no, don't. You can set any boundary you want, but if you don't maintain it, it's the end of it. Yeah. So,
do you have maybe an example of that? So for people watching, as in a boundary that you felt you set, but then you didn't maintain.
Yeah. For example, let's say, you know, setting boundary is, let's say, all right, well, you're gonna watch the kids from this time to this time, right? You're gonna it's your responsibility. It's your week per se, or whatever. And slowly but surely, it's like, oh, something came up at work. Okay, we can work with that, or you know. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, well, I got this extra gym session going on. And all of a sudden you find yourself in, you know, like, okay, well, I picked up the kids this time, and I did this for you, I did this for you. And then you end up taking the majority of, it goes back to taking responsibility, right? And we're taking accountability. You end up taking the majority of the workload. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of it. I know it's very vague, but you know.
No, that's a good example, Falcon. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so letting it slip. Yeah, that's totally something that we can do. What about yourself, Optimus?
One that I can definitely pull right now would be same thing, and just in regards to conversations. So I always put the boundary up that I will not continue a conversation if things got too heated and, you know, there was a lot of name calling and things like that. I told her that conversations can be had as long as the boundary of respect was in place. the minute name calling and all those aspects came into it, I told her that I would be removing myself from the situation and from the conversation until we can come back clearly as adults and have that conversation without, the name calling being had.
That's really good. Yeah, is not willing to tolerate disrespect. That's very important. Okay, what do you think are other signs that guys don't have clear boundaries off the top of your head? Well, I know last week in our Center of Exceptional Communication in the ARC system, we had a full session on setting boundaries. What do you think guys are, because most people think it's a clear boundary. It's, as in you just tell your wife what you want done. And then if she doesn't do it, she's not respecting a boundary. And if she does do it, she's respecting the boundary, but it's really not that simple. What are some of the symptoms that you're not having clear boundaries in your life? Oh, just off the top of your head, guys, that, that come in, that you are not setting clear boundaries in your life. How do you know that that's happening? What are the things, apart from your wife not taking accountability or not showing respect? What else do you think? What are the implications if you're not setting clear boundaries in your life? What are some of the signs that you'll know that you're not doing it? Falk, do you have anything on that?
I'm not sure I understand the question again.
How do you know? What are some of the symptoms of not having clear boundaries? So how will you know that you're not actually? You might say, I've got clear boundaries. So for instance, I would say I've got very clear boundaries, but in the past, so I would have just said, yeah, I've got clear boundaries because I don't take shit. But then I would look at how I work and how it was very much taking up so much of my life that's not clear boundaries. Between my work and my private life, there weren't clear boundaries. So I would have clear boundaries in certain spaces. And what was happening was I was feeling overwhelmed. It was too much for me. That is a sign of not having clear boundaries, feeling overwhelmed. I'm just wondering if there's anything else from your perspective that you can reflect on where you feel like, okay, this is a sign that you don't have clear boundaries in your life.
No, that's a good question. Yeah, I guess if you don't have clear boundaries, then I related back one time. Evie said to in Center of Healing, she said a boundary is the line you draw between where you stop loving yourself. So I go back to what she said all the time when I think of boundaries, and I think when you start, when someone oversteps that boundary, then that's when you kind of you let them you let them take over you, like not over you, but you allow them, because it's all about you, right? So you allow them to take advantage, or or so that would be like one example that I can think of.
Very good. Very good. What about yourself, Optimus? Is there anything that pops to mind?
Emotional drainage and physical. Definitely, I could see myself when I get, emotionally drained and exhausted. I definitely know that there's some sort of boundary that's being crossed, because, we're all supposed to be healthy. So when that happens, you know that there's something, not right.
Yeah, something needs to be corrected.
Yes.
Right. We got Woodsy saying a lack of respect shown by people at work as well as my wife. Thanks for sharing that, Woodsy. Yeah, that is something that requires a clear boundary, and you ultimately, like Falcon said, loving yourself. And as my wife put it in the Center of Healing, as in that's the boundary of where you stop loving yourself. Once you totally respect yourself and love yourself, people can't disrespect you. You'll put a stop to that fairly quickly. You just won't tolerate it. Okay. Another one that I find that you don't have clear boundaries, and this is how tricky it is. If you don't have clear boundaries, you're going to feel like you're doing everything. I'm doing everything. She won't do a thing. I'm picking up after the kids. I'm looking after them, doing that. This is a sign that you don't have clear boundaries. You are prioritizing what's happening out there, so to take over what somebody else should be doing over your own needs. This is a very clear example of a lack of boundaries. Another lack of boundaries is where you feel like you're being disrespected all the time, that you're being taken advantage of. This is another one. And yeah, that you're basically, you feel like a martyr, like you do everything. This is a very clear sign that you don't have clear boundaries, that you're not putting yourself first. I think you guys know, you've been in the program long enough, how important it is and how things transform in your life when we start putting ourselves first, right? It's a game
Definitely.
changer.
Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. So, Jeff, really, what's really important, if we bring it back to Jeff here, the clear boundaries is knowing what you're willing to do for yourself, and then also, because it's only when you're clear on your own boundaries, this is mine, I'm willing to do this, the rest is hers. Then you stop applying pressure, you stop trying to get this outcome, and really, like we always do in the ARC system, guys, we celebrate the action of having that conversation is the win. Whether she actually then complies with that or not, that's none of our business. We can't control that. So guys, now that you understand what you need to do when your wife is refusing to take accountability, you're going to want to watch this next video on how to transform your marriage when she is refusing to go to counseling.